Probably hit that a little bit too early, but it's probably fine. We're only on Twitch and YouTube. No one follows us there. All right. Oh, dip. Are we not going to have music? Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. That's not good. Okay, there it goes. Thank goodness. Alright. No one's here yet. Everything's fine. Alright. Hey everybody, I'm BGM, and I just realized that these live recordings, I should probably do an intro as soon as I start hitting stream. I hope you're all having a good day, or night, or evening, or wherever you may be, wherever in the world you may be. We are doing Vampire Tribal tonight, as voted on by the Bigger Gayer Discord. Please vibe with me for a few more moments while I finish setting up the stream. And also, if you're a returning visitor who's watched these recordings before, I'm sorry for not doing that in previous recordings. We're going to work on that in the future. Cool. All right, and we are live on TikTok as well. Fantastic. All right, there we go. It's happening. We are doing live deck building. Fantastic. Okay. Pull up our browser. Hell yeah, we are good to go. All right, everybody. I hope you're all having a lovely evening. I am Bigger Gayer Magic, also known as BGM. I'm a video editor and streamer, and on lives, we do live deck building. Today, we are building Edgar Markov. And this is an Eminence commander. Eminence means that it has a triggered ability, and it can trigger even when it's in the command zone. This one says that whenever you cast another vampire spell, you make yourself a little vampire black creature token. That's it. You just make a bunch of vampires. Edgar Markov is a go-wide tribal strategy using the vampire type. This thing was originally printed in the Commander Precons alongside the Dragon, Arabo, and Kess Dissonant Mage. It was wizards, vampires, dragons, and cats. And if you want to run cards that care about creature types and anything that says kindred, tribal was in the precursor days of Magic, at a time long past, some would argue not past, kindred was the word for tribal. This is Kindred Boon. This thing came out in the Vampire Precon from the Caverns of Ixalan. This one says that as it enters the battlefield, we choose a creature type. We're going to choose Vampire because of our commander, Edgar Markov. And when that happens, we have an activated ability. We can put a divinity counter on target creature you control of the chosen type. And each creature we control with a divinity counter on it has indestructible. So this thing, we want to be putting a bunch of mana into this thing throughout the course of a game because we want to be activating it multiple times. We want to be making at least Edgar Markov indestructible off this Kindred Boon. Probably some other pieces, probably like a Veto of the Dusk Rose would be a cool thing to give indestructible as well. And this thing just hangs out, gives indestructible. It is a little bit of a mana investment though. You do need to invest 6 mana into the spell before it does anything for you, which is a bit of a bummer. But it hangs out, it comes out early as a 4-drop. I don't know. Do you guys like this card? I don't know if I'd run it. I feel like I'd rather run something like a Flawless Maneuver. Let's talk about Flawless Maneuver. I love Flawless Maneuver. Flawless Maneuver is like $10, but I really love it. It's one of my favorite white cards. Oh, cool. They made a reprint of Flawless Maneuver in the Captain America Secret Lore. This is a 3-drop mono white instant, and if it says if you control a commander as you're casting the spell, you can cast it for free. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. That's all, y'all. That's all it needs to do. It's a free indestructible if you got your commander on the battlefield. Hey, everybody, if you're just now joining me, we're building Edgar Markov. We're doing Vampire Tribal tonight. If you want to suggest any vampire cards in the comments, if you see it over here, it'll be put into our Moxfield deck list. And if you want to see what other vampires people are running in their Edgar Markovs, you can check out the Moxfield page and see what other people are suggesting. The only card you need in the deck is Skull. You're right. Honestly, Skull Clamp is amazing. Skull Clamp is so good, y'all. If you are running a deck and you are making little 1/1 little creature tokens, you should be running Skull Clamp because Skull Clamp says pay 1 mana, draw 2 cards, and kill one of your guys. This thing's a little piece of equipment. It's $10, and it draws you all the cards you ever need if you have 1/1s in your deck. So you cast it for 1 mana, and you equip it for 1 mana, and your 1/1 dies, and you draw 2 cards. It's simple. Once it's on the board, it kind of functions like pay 1 mana, sacrifice a 1/1, draw 2 cards. It's so good. And because Edgar Markov shits out little easy 1/1s so easily, we are going to have plenty of fodder for our Skull Clamp. Thank you for the suggestion. Ooh, hey Chaotic Master, good to see you. Hey Chaotic, how are you doing tonight? We're building Vampire Tribal tonight. If you have any suggestions for our Vampire Tribal deck, please put them in the comments. Yeah, I got a big OG foil. I remember when that came out. Oh yeah, you got the OG foil from the pre-con. Let's talk about Vito of the Dusk Rose. I love Vito of the Dusk Rose. I run him in so many decks. He's a little legendary black vampire. He himself is a 1/3, and he says whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. I love Vito. I've built a mono black Vito deck, and it's so silly and fun. And if you're running instants that can gain you a big chunks of life at a time, it is so... I loved my Vito deck. It was so fun. It was leaning towards CDH, though. It's cool. Also, this thing also has an activated ability, and for 5 mana, you can give your whole board lifelink. And when you get those lifelink triggers, Vito's going to trigger, and he's going to hurt your opponents even more. I love Vito. I love that... Oh, shit. This one's $6? Damn. Vito's been printed all over the place, guys. I'm pretty sure if you wanted a Vito, you can definitely get it for less than $6. Thank you for the follow, JB. I appreciate it. I am BGM. I'm a video editor and streamer, and I make silly little Magic the Gathering content all over the internet using primarily green screens and graphics. We got suggested an Edgar Charmed Groom. It's a 4-mana legendary Orzhov vampire. Came out in the red wedding thing from Innistrad. Crimson Vow, that's right. Other vampires you control get +1/+1. This is great. This is a vampire. Our commander, Edgar, also makes vampires. This will make all our vampires bigger. And when this thing dies, you return it to the battlefield as a legendary artifact. That says at the beginning of your upkeep, you make a little life-linking 1/1, and you put a Bloodline counter on Edgar Markov's coffin. If there are 3 more Bloodline counters on it, it turns back into Edgar, who is a lord for or excuse me, not a lord. Yeah, he is a lord because he gives everything a little bit more power and toughness. This thing's very cool. It's $4, and it was printed in Crimson Vow. Thank you for the suggestion. Ooh, Cavallenia, Sky Sea Bear says a big fan of Cavalleno. Clavelenio. Is Clavelenio the sack outlet? Okay, no, he's not the sack outlet. He's the box commander for the Vampire Precon from Caverns of Ixalan. This is a little dollar commander. He's 3 mana. He's in Orzhov colors, and he's a 2/2. And he says whenever you attack, target attacking vampire that ain't a demon becomes a demon. It's a 4/3 white and black vampire demon. And when this creature dies, you draw a card, and you create a 4/3 black vampire demon. Okay, cool. So it gives your vampire a death trigger to turn into a demon. And the demon is also a vampire. And the demon flies. That's cool. Okay. So we have Cavalleno. We want to be attacking. We make one of our vampires this. Maybe a 1/1. And that way, when the 1/1 dies, it becomes a 4/3. And we get more value by sacking the 1/1. Very cool. Or we can sacrifice a vampire, like, or we can target, like, Edgar that we just saw. Edgar would be a cool thing to target, because Edgar kind of wants to die. Because when Edgar dies, he flips into the artifact that generates us tokens at our upkeep. I feel like that would be a good thing to put that trigger on. Ooh, Austin Lucas wants us to run Anointed Procession. So Anointed Procession's rad. Anointed Procession is expensive, but that's fine. Anointed Procession is 4 mana. It's white. Anointed Procession. Yeah, it's white. It's $70. It's an enchantment, and it says if you would make tokens, you make twice that many tokens instead. This thing is definitely worth a proxy. I love this thing. This thing originally came out in Amonkhet. You know, it would be so cool if they reprinted this thing in Aether Drift, because, like, Aether Drift is the first time that we go back to the plane of Amonkhet at all, since, like, War of the Spark and the Amonkhet block. They should have reprinted this in Aether Drift. They gave us some, like, cool, not Kaldheim, Kaladesh reprints. They should have gave us this. Grievous Wound. Matt wants us to run a Grievous Wound. I love me some Grievous Wound. Grievous Wound came out in Duskmourn, and it is so effective in Commander. Grievous Wound it's black, it's an enchantment, you enchant a player, and they are your victim. Because Grievous Wound says you enchant a player, the enchanted player can't gain life, and whenever the enchanted player is dealt damage, they lose half their life rounded up. This thing is insane, y'all. This thing is crazy. I love this thing. It is so fun in Commander. I love that it's $1.30. The art is very sick on it. If you check out the scary lady in the ceiling, this thing's a total win for me. I love it. It's $1.50. It just says that one player needs to die. And because our board is going to have a bunch of little lifelink, little vampire token creatures, we're going to be able to get in and get that trigger. This thing's very cool. So if you guys are not familiar with Rip Roll Repeat, he's a content creator on TikTok. and he does Magic the Gathering rulings, and I specifically asked him about this card, Grievous Wound. And he told me that even if we are able to deal damage with multiple creatures, this is only going to happen once per turn, because at the damage step, the damage happens all at the same time. And that was his ruling. I don't think it functions that way intuitively, but also I'm not a judge or like a rules person. I just like talking about cardboard, y'all. Thanks for the suggestion of the Grievous Wound. Armando Hernandez wants us to run a Maverin Fane. Yeah, Maverin Fane's rad. I have actually played against Maverin Fane like a week or two ago. Maverin Fane is a white legendary 3-drop. It's a vampire. It's also a cleric, and whenever one or more non-token vampires you control attack, you make a little vampire creature token with lifelink. This thing's great. He makes little lifelinking vampire tokens. He himself is a vampire. He will make a vampire off our commander Edgar's cast trigger. Oh, Butcher of Malakir, Ivan Jumper, good to see you. Let's talk about the Butcher of Malakir. Butcher of Malakir is rad. Thank you for hanging out with me on Twitch, y'all. Butcher of Malakir is a mean card, y'all. My favorite strategy in all of Commander is an aristocrat strategy, and then that strategy you want to be sacrificing your own creatures to value so you can win the game. I don't run this card or cards like that in that strategy because I feel like they're too mean, in my personal opinion. But y'all play whatever you want. I'm here to talk about the cards y'all want to talk about. And this thing says, whenever this thing or another creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Vampire decks in these colors sacrifice creatures on purpose for value. There's often an altar or a way to get rid of tokens. We also saw Skull Clamp, which isn't really a sack outlet, but it does kill things. And if they have a way to sacrifice creatures at instant speed, it is an ongoing board wipe effect. And it is pretty miserable to play with, in my experience. But if you want to win, if your goal... It's from... This one's from the Innistrad reprint. Other vampire creatures you control get +1/+1. You tap 5 vampires you control and you gain control of target creature. Period. Not until end of turn. Tap 5 vampires, it's yours now. This thing's mean as hell. And we are going to have a ton of vampires because, again, Edgar's just going to keep shitting out little vampires on cast trigger. Whenever you cast another vampire spell, if it's in the command zone or if it's anywhere, y'all, you make a little vampire. Doesn't this thing kind of look like David Tennant, that British actor? I don't know. This thing's cool. Tap 5 vampires you control, gain control of the target creature. Period. You can do this nonsense at instant speed. This is disgusting. Okay. Absolutely disgusting. Ooh, Ivan wants us to run the Cordial Vampire as well. Let's talk about a Cordial Vampire. Hey everybody, if you're just now joining me, I am BGM. I am a streamer and content creator. I make silly little Magic Gathering videos. If you want to suggest a card for a Vampire Tribal deck, put it in the comments, y'all. This is Cordial Vampire. It's a 2-drop black Vampire 1/1, and it says whenever this thing or another creature dies, you'll put a +1/+1 counter on your boy. So this thing doesn't excite me. If this thing had any keyword, if it had Menace even, if it had Vigilance, if it had something, if we had a way to give this thing a keyword, I could be excited about it. But in Commander, just a creature that becomes big slowly, nah, it doesn't excite me. What does excite me, though, is it can come out early and it makes another vampire, and it is itself a vampire and contributes to our large board. But I really wish this thing had, like, Death Touch or Lifelink. I wish it had a keyword, honestly. I just wish it had a keyword. Wait. Put a +1 on each. Never mind. It's each vampire you control. I'm full of shit. This thing's amazing. Who's Ivan Jumper? Ivan Jumper. My bad. Okay, this says each vampire. This thing's actually amazing. If it was just itself, I would poo-poo all over it. Thank you, Ivan. No, this thing makes your entire board big. And it's, again, we've talked about Skull Clamp. We talked about the Butcher of Malakir. Vampire decks want to be sacrificing their little value tokens. This thing, we can sacrifice our little tokens and make our big significant boys big and significant. Okay, my bad. I missed a word on that. I'm sorry, y'all. Thank you for the follows on TikTok. I appreciate it. Angel and Sir Gabasa, I appreciate it. Hobby Collector, yup. My bad. I dropped the ball on that one, guys. And do you have in your deck Architect? No, unfortunately, Angel, we are using Moxfield. Ooh, we got suggested a Blood Artist. Blood Artist. Blood Artist is one of my favorite Aristocrats cards. It says that it's a 2/2, it's 2 mana, it's $2, and it's a 0/1, and it says whenever this creature or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. The thing that's super fun and really abusable about our friend Blood Artist here is that Blood Artist triggers on your opponent's creatures too. So they trigger on your opponent's creatures, so whenever your opponents are going to combat and they're blocking and things are dying, you're going to get little itty-bitty Blood Artist triggers. And if you think someone's a problem, you can just take little bits of life from them throughout the course of a game. I think it's really fun just to run Blood Artist in a deck if you're running black. It is a little bit of life gain. It does kind of do some significant number things when you're doing 1C, 2C's damage. Notable about Blood Artist, though, when you're resolving these triggers and you're announcing them, it's going to draw attention to you. Because things are going to die, it might be happening every turn, and then you're going to realize, oh, that person has a Blood Artist, and they speak during everybody's turn. So you might get targeted, even though it's not doing a whole lot, it does draw attention because the triggers happen often. A lot like Rhystic Study, except Rhystic Study wins you the game. Yeah, Blood Artist is a great trigger for Grievous Wound. Ooh, Crossway Troublemakers. Let's talk about a Crossway Troublemakers. Crossway Troublemakers. Crossway Troublemakers. Crossway Troublemakers is a 6-drop black vampire 5/5 that says attacking vampires you control. They got Death Touch, they got Lifelink, and whenever a vampire you control dies, you may pay 2 life, and if you do, you draw a card. This thing was printed in the Vampire Precon, and this thing's just actually amazing. This thing's so good. So good. It's card draw, right? It's card draw on death triggers. We can pay 2 life every time. We're in vampires, and our vampires are going to have lifelink with this, so we're going to have no problem paying that 2 life to draw cards when we kill our creatures, because we're probably going to be killing our creatures on purpose. This thing's amazing. It's only 50 cents, and also look at this one. This one's horny. This one's a great... I love it. It's a good card. Sky Sea Bear wants us to run a Necropolis Regent. Necropolis Regent. Necropolis Regent is a 6-drop black vampire. It's a 6/5 and it flies. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put that many counters on it. That many +1. This thing's amazing. So this thing's really good actually. Okay. So we win in Edgar Markov, in my experience, probably by having a large board of vampires and putting +1/+1 counters on them with Edgar's trigger, or doing Lord effects, or this thing's crazy. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put that many +1/+1 count. This thing's gonna make your board disgusting so fast. This thing's just good in a +1/+1 counter deck too. This thing's only $1. This thing's so good. This thing's so good. Very cool suggestion. I've not seen this thing before. Thank you, Sky Sea Bear. It is so fast. It is so fast. Brian wants us to run this here Dark Imposter. Let's talk about a Dark Imposter. Dark Imposter is not a card I'm familiar with. Dark Imposter. Dark Imposter. Did I not spell it right? Yeah, Dark Imposter. It's 3 mana. It's a vampire assassin. Came out in one of the Innistrad sets. It's a 2/2. It's an activated ability. We can pay 6 mana, 2 black pips, and 4 generic. Exile target creature and put a +1/+1 counter on your imposter. Dark Imposter has all activated abilities of all creatures exiled with it. This thing's cool. So if we see like a Mother of Runes, or like a protection piece, or maybe like an Avatar of Woe, or really any spicy activated ability, or maybe if we just want to use it for removal, this thing could just be an expensive removal piece to dump mana into. It's cool. I like that you can activate this at instant speed. I don't like that it's 6 mana, but it is a vampire, and it does count as removal. Because, you know, you got, even if it's 6, it's still instant speed. I don't know. I feel like we're going to be using it primarily for removal and less for stealing activated abilities. But this thing's still really cool. It's also only 70 cents. Very cool suggestion, Brian. Appreciate it. Ooh, Astarion the Decknet. Guys, I played Baldur's Gate 3 twice. Astarion rejected me, and it made me sad. But Astarion in Commander is the bomb. He's a 6-drop Orzhov vampire vampire elf rogue. He's a death-touching, life-linking creature, and he's got yourself an end-step trigger. And his end-step trigger says that you can either have target opponent lose life equal to the amount of life they lost this turn, or you gain life equal to the amount of life you gain this turn. I really like Astarion. I run him in my Nethroid lifelink deck because he himself is a relevant body and has lifelink. And it's really fun to put counters on Astarion, especially with that lifelink trigger. You can gain insane amounts of life at your end step, or you can just kill your opponents off the feed trigger. Astarion's good, y'all. Astarion's so good. He's also cheap as hell. This one's only $1. Ooh, Olivia Voldaren. Dream Demon wants us to run Olivia Voldaren. Olivia Voldaren is a Rakdos 4-drop legendary vampire, and it says that you can activate it for 2, and it deals 1 damage to another target creature, and that creature becomes a vampire in addition to its other types. Put a +1/+1 counter on Olivia. This commander's mean. So you pay 2 mana, you make something a vampire, you put a counter on it, and now it's a vampire. And it's going to be a vampire forever because Olivia put the counter on it. It's not until end of turn. And then you can pay 5 mana and you can just gain control of a vampire for as long as you control Olivia Voldaren. It's disgusting, y'all. I've seen a lot of Olivia Voldaren decks. They just make a crap ton of mana and they just steal the board. It's a little oppressive. Olivia Voldaren's a really good card, though. And for $5, it used to be a lot more expensive than $5, so that's cool. It also flies, which is relevant. Oh, Mr. D-Man wants us to run a Sorin the Mirthless. Sorin the Mirthless. Sounds mono black. Yup, sure is. 4 mana, legendary planeswalker, Sorin, 4 loyalty, $6, +1. Look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card and put it into your hand. If you do, you lose life equal to its CMC. -2, you create a 2/3 black vampire creature token with flying and lifelink. That's spicy. I like that it has keywords on this little vampire token. That's probably the ability I'd use as soon as it enters the battlefield. Then -7, Sorin deals 13 damage to any target and you gain 13 life. Okay, so I don't know about y'all. I don't know what kind of pods y'all are playing Commander in. But in my pods, ain't nobody letting me ult any Planeswalker ever. So when it comes to like me evaluating Planeswalkers for Commanders, I just kind of cover that bottom ability up because my friends are never going to let me reach it. But this second ability, this is a spicy little token. It's got lifelink. We have things in the deck that care about life gain. This is cool. Also, the +1 can put creatures into our hands, right? Nope, it can just put things that aren't creatures as well. This thing's cool. Pretty good. Also, it's card draw. Thank you for the suggestion. Ooh, Bloodline Keeper. Let's talk about Bloodline Keeper. Bloodline Keeper is the flippy one. Bloodline Keeper is the flipping vampire. It is a 4-drop black vampire. Flies, 3/3. 2 activated abilities. Tap it. Make a 2/2 vampire with flying. Pay a black. Transform it into this vampire. And this one is a flying 5/5. And other vampire creatures you control get +2/+2. Yikes on trikes. Oh, so you can only transform if you have 5 or more vampires, and that just makes your vampires big. This thing's so good. This thing's so good. This version's $8. We've seen a few prints. I think this thing's been printed 2 or 3 times. This is the reprint from the Innistrad Remastered set. This thing's great. It itself makes vampires. It is a vampire, and it transforms into a very spicy vampire that makes other vampires bigger. This thing's great. It also, and oh my god, this thing can make vampires on this side as well. And now when it makes a vampire, it's a 4/4. Oh my god. This thing's insane. This thing is so good. Thank you for the suggestion. Ooh, Blade of the Blood Chief. Blade of the Blood Chief. Hey everybody, if you are just now joining me, I am Bigger Gayer Magic. I use green screen effects and other graphics to make silly little Magic Gathering content all over the internet. And if you're having a good time, I'm glad. Thanks for joining me for live deck building. We're doing Vampire Tribal. If you want to suggest a vampire card, and if you put it in the comments, and if you see it over here to be put into a Moxfield deck list, you can see everybody else's suggestion for Edgar Markov in the Moxfield deck list, and that's on the TikTok profile. Thanks for hanging with me. This is a Blade of the Blood Chief. It's a 1-mana, $9 artifact, and it says whenever a creature dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on the equipped creature. But if the equipped creature is a vampire, you get 2 of them counters instead. This thing's great. It has equip 1 and cast for 1. You put it on your, probably Edgar, or probably something big. Maybe something with, like, I don't know, it flies, maybe has lifelink, something with a keyword. Good to go, especially if it's, ooh, so good. So good! Ooh, VersaFX wants us to run Contamination. Let's talk about Contamination. Contamination is not a card I'm familiar with, but it sounds black. Contamination. Come on, Contamination, you can load. I believe in you. Come on, Contamination. Alright, Contamination. It's 3-drop, it's an enchantment, it's black, it's $8. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, you sacrifice Contamination unless you sacrifice a creature. And if a land is tapped for mana, it produces black instead of any other type and amount. That's disgusting, and I hate this. I hate this so much, actually. This is what I would call a stacks piece. Because you're turning everyone's mana black, if a land is tapped for mana, that's everybody's lands. That's our lands, your lands, everybody's lands. They all produce black instead of what other color you came here to play today. This thing's a hardcore stacks piece. But at least it's kind of fair in the way that at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice it unless you sacrifice a creature. So at least we can run out of creatures, but also it is so, I don't know. It's mean, y'all. It's a mean card. Hey, Rip Pull Repeat. Don't listen to Rip Pull Repeat. In fact, never listen to Rip Pull Repeats. Thanks for popping in, Rip. Malakir Blood Witch is our next suggestion. Rip, I sent you a message on Discord. I hope you saw it. Malakir Blood Witch is a 5-drop black vampire 4/4. It's got flying and it's protection from white. Whenever this thing enters the battlefield, each opponent loses life equal to the number of vampires you control, and you gain that much life. This thing kind of reminds me of like a Grey Merchant of Asphodel, except this thing might just be better. It's the same cost as the Grey Merchant, it itself has protection, it's a relevant body, and it flies. And it's gonna make your opponents lose so much life, and it's gonna make us gain a big fat stack of life. Because in an Edgar Markov deck, by the time we get to 5 mana, we're already gonna have 2 or 3 vampires on the battlefield. I don't predict this thing hitting our opponents for less than 5. And if we hit 3 people for 5, we're going to be gaining 15 off this thing. And that feels like a pretty reasonable and low-end trigger to me. This thing's cool, though. It's $3. The art's metal as hell, too. Oh, Kyle Abel, this Edgar Markov was your first commander deck? Damn, damn, dude, it's already downhill from there. Edgar's, like, top tier. Ooh, Ivan Jumper wants us to run Sorin Markov. Did we look at Sorin Markov already? I know we looked at one of them. Sorin Markov is a 6-drop black legendary planeswalker. Enters with 4 loyalty, 3 activated abilities, +2. Deals 2 damage to target creature, and you gain 2 life. -3, target opponent's life total becomes 10. Y'all, straight up, this is the ability you use when Sorin enters the battlefield. Sorin enters, someone's life total is now 10. That's how you play this card. And then if you hit mine, guys, don't even look at the last ability on Planeswalkers. Your friends aren't going to let you hit them. But if you do get there, you control target player's next turn. That's spicy. Damn. Very cool. Actually, maybe we could ult Sorin in this deck. Because we're going to have a crap ton of vampire blockers, we've seen a ton of vampires with flying already, and like even some flying Death Touchers. Like we saw that vampire Nighthawk that had like lifelink flying and Death Touch. Thank you very much for the follow, Zoo York. I appreciate it. I'm BGM. I'm a video editor and streamer, and I make silly little Magic the Gathering videos all over the internet, and I use green screen effects to do it. Thanks for hanging out with me. If you want to see any of the cards that we talked about over here during live deck building, you can check out the Moxfield profile on the link tree. And if you want to vote on commanders for live deck building, you can join the Bigger Gear Discord. Thanks for hanging out with me. And thank you guys for the 1,600 likes. Wow. Oh, wow, that was fast. Thank you guys for hanging out. All right, this is a Banner of Kinship. It's a $9 artifact. It came out in Foundations. Looks like it's from Bloomburrow. The mice are vibing. And when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. We're probably picking vampires. And creatures you control get +1/+1 for each fellowship counter, and you put fellowship counters on it. When you choose that creature type, you put a counter on it for each creature you control of the chosen type. This thing's great. We've been seeing this thing suggested any deck that we pull up here that cares about tribals, anything, we've been seeing a Banner of Kinship. This card's really hot right now. A lot of people are psyched about this card. It's got a very cute art. Came out in Foundations. It's good. It's $10. But the thing about this card is you already have to be having a good board state. Like, if your board is empty and you cast this thing, you're probably going to have a bad time. It's kind of like a win more card to me. Elenda, I like Elenda. Elenda the Dusk Rose. Elenda the Dusk Rose is a 4-mana Orzhov lifelinking 1/1. Whenever another creature dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on Elenda. Notable about the way that Elenda's trigger is worded, whenever another creature dies. That's not just our creatures, that's also our opponent's creatures. When this thing dies, though, you make a bunch of 1/1 lifelinking vampires off Elenda's power. I love Elenda. Elenda as a Voltron commander, not even vampire tribal, just a Voltron commander. Elenda is so sick. I love Elenda. Excuse me. Once upon a time, Elenda was like $20, and I love that card enough that I bought it when it was expensive, and I still love it. I love this card. Elenda was one of the very last legendaries originally printed in the Rivals of Ixalan. I think it was the last block that didn't have legend crowns. I think the block directly after the one this was printed in is the one where they added the legend crowns. Legend crowns are this top border that you see how it's fancy? That's called a legend crown. How do we feel about the Ozolith? I talk about the Ozolith a lot. So the Ozolith is expensive. It goes in Artifacty Storm decks because it's a cheap legendary artifact, and it actually does something. This thing says, if you have a creature leave the battlefield and it's got counters on it, you put it on the Ozolith. And at the beginning of combat, you take the counters on the Ozolith and you put them on your boy. This thing's cool. This is a reprint. It's got a different name. I think this is from Fallout. Please correct me if I'm wrong. It's cool. It's simply just one of the best, most aggressively fast pieces of counter care about cards ever. It goes in Artifact Storm decks because of its mana cost. It's a good one. Thank you very much for the follow, Peyton Ripper. I appreciate it. Ooh, VersaFX wants us to run the Moonshaker Cavalry. So Moonshaker Cavalry is a card. It came out in Eldraine, the Wilds of Eldraine, about 1.5 years ago. It's 20 bucks. It's an 8-mana white 6/6 flying Spirit Knight, and when it enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain flying and get +X/+X, where X is the amount of creatures you got. This thing is often compared to a card called Craterhoof Behemoth, and if you've ever lost to Craterhoof Behemoth, I don't need to tell you what it does. Craterhoof Behemoth enters the battlefield, and if you got enough creatures, you win the game off Craterhoof Behemoth's trigger. This thing is a lot like Craterhoof, except it's almost as good. Because I'm pretty sure Craterhoof also gives trample. This one gives flying. This thing, though, it goes great, even though it's not a vampire. Edgar Markov works off of having a big board of vampires. Edgar has a wide board. He has at least a crap ton of tokens off his cast triggers. And this thing enters, and it just makes all your creatures big, gives them flying. You can probably end the game. This is our white Craterhoof. Have you talked about Captivating? Yeah, we did talk about Captivating Vampire, but I'll talk about it again. Captivating Vampire is rad. Let's talk about it again. Also, he kind of looks like David Tennant, the British actor, to me. It says other vampires can get +1/+1. The cards that care about a creature type and give cards of that type +1/+1 are known as lords. Tap 5 untap vampires you control as an activated ability that we can activate at instant speed, I might add, and you just gain control of target thing and it becomes a vampire. At instant speed, you can activate this during your opponent's turns and make them big upsetty spaghetti. This thing's very cool. We've also saw Olivia Voldaren, which can snatch up our opponent's creatures as well. And this thing just got a reprint in the new Innistrad Remastered. Ooh, Dodge Boy. Oh no, Dodge Boy, where's your suggestion? Streffen. S-T-R-E-F... Streffen. We're gonna pull up Streffen. Is that the sack outlet creature? Streffen. Oh no! Okay, Streffen was in a different Vampire Precon. This Vampire Precon came out around the time of Crimson Vow. This 4-drop 3/2 flyer says at the beginning of your end step, you create a blood token for each player who lost life this turn. And whenever this thing attacks, you may sacrifice 2 blood tokens. If you do, you may put a vampire card from your hand onto the battlefield. Tapped and attacking, it gains indestructible until end of turn. This thing's kind of cool. I tell you what, though, when we talk about vampire cards, we don't see a lot of stuff from Steffen's Precon. We mostly have been seeing a lot of stuff from the Vampire Precon from the Caverns of Ixalan, and also just Edgar's Precon himself. This thing's cool, though. It's a vibe. This deck, the Vampires then cared about these little artifact tokens called blood tokens, and to tell you the truth, I don't even remember what blood tokens do. But this thing's cool. It itself is a flying body. Yeah, cool. Thank you for the suggestion. All right. Kevin wants us to run a Sanguine Bond. Sanguine Bond. Sanguine Bond is often just referred to in context of its combo piece, Exquisite Blood. This is a 5-drop black enchantment for $5 that says whenever you gain life, target opponent loses life. We saw a vampire at the very beginning of the live called Veto of the Dusk Rose, which is a 3-drop legendary creature with this triggered ability stapled onto it. Let's see. Is someone going to put it in? Or the Champion of Dusk? No. Champion of... I was so expecting someone to pull up the the exquisite blood vampire that came out in Foundations. Champion of Dusk came out originally in the Rivals of Ixalan expansion. It's a 5-drop vampire knight. It's black. It's a 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the amount of vampires you control. This is it, y'all. This thing's amazing. So oftentimes, so this thing's on an ETB trigger. In these colors, a way we can abuse an ETB trigger is we could sacrifice this thing, because once this thing enters the battlefield, it did what we needed it to do. After we did resolve this ETB, he's just a vanilla 4/4. We can sacrifice him for value or mana or card draw, and then if we have a way to pull him out of the graveyard and put him back onto the battlefield, we get his ETB a second time. So that's a way that I imagine we could abuse his ETB. We could have him enter, sack him for value, and then pull him out of the graveyard, put him back, get that ETB again. That's how I imagine we can use this thing, and we can just draw big chunks of cards off our Champion of Dusk. Legion's Landing. Equinox Paradox, good to see you. Legion's Landing. Legion's Landing is... Oh, I tell you what, I really liked Legion's Landing. My first commander deck that I really loved and that I really made like function at a really high level, it wasn't quite CDH, but it was an Aristocrats deck. And I put this in it because this thing is technically ramp. It generates you a token, you cast it, it hangs out on the battlefield, it makes you a little 1/1 life-linking vampire, and when you attack with 3 or more creatures, you flip it into a land that taps for white. You can also pay 3 mana to make the token, but I don't think I've ever done that. Mostly, I had it in my Aristocrats deck because it's a 1-drop that makes a token, the token has lifelink, and that deck cared about life gain triggers. I really like this card. This card is $6. It's cheap, it flips into a land, it makes you a guy. But I gotta tell you what, since then, as I revised the deck, I did eventually take this card out because it just makes you a guy and becomes a land. Bloodghast, though. Is Bloodghast the thing that comes back? Oh, it sure is the thing that comes back. Okay, Bloodghast, this thing is getting a reprint in Aether Drift in 2 days! Yay! Aether Drift in 2 days. Alright, cool. This creature can't block. This creature has haste as long as the opponent has 10 or less life, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, you may put this thing from the graveyard back onto your battlefield. So we talked a lot about sacrifice outlets. We talked about a thing called Skull Clamp to draw cards. We talked about a Phyrexian Altar to make colored mana, and I think we saw that Ashnod's Altar that makes colorless. This thing is a little sacrificable creature, and whenever we hit a land drop, we put it back onto the battlefield, which means we can just sack it over and over and over again. This thing is the key to crazy amounts of mana and crazy amounts of card draw over the course of a game in our Edgar deck. This thing's amazing. In fact, I'm pretty sure it came in Edgar's precon, if I'm not mistaken. Great suggestion. Kevin wants us to play the Gatekeeper of Malakir, though. Gatekeeper? Are we gatekeeping Malakir? Gatekeeper of Malakir. Hey everybody, if you're just now joining me, I am BGM. I am an I make little MTG videos all over the internet. And on lives, we do live deck building. If you are looking to see what other people are putting into Edgar Markov, you can check out the Moxfield link that is in the link tree. Gatekeeper of Malakir. Gatekeeper of Malakir. There we go. Gatekeeper of Malakir. It's 2 mana, black, 50 cents. It's got kicker. And when this creature enters, if it was kick, target player sacrifices a creature of their choice, it's a 2/2. Okay, so this thing got a reprint in Foundations, it looks like. It's 50 cents. It looks like a Zendikar vampire. This thing reminds me of like a Fleshbag Marauder. It's kind of like an edict on a creature. An edict is an effect that forces a player to sacrifice something. If you force a player to sacrifice something, it's a way you can get around indestructible. It's a way you can get around hexproof. But it doesn't function super highly if they have a big board. This thing's cool though. It enters, it dies, it gives us death triggers when it dies for value, and it's cool. We can kick it. Yeah, kick it for a total of 3 mana, force an edict. That's not so bad. Ooh, you want us to run a Myrel Shield of Argive in our vampire deck? You want us to run a Myrel Shield of Argive in our vampire deck? Are there things that make vampire soldier tokens? Myrel Shield of Argive. Shield of Argive. Why can I not spell shield? Shield of Argive. Myrel Shield of Argive is a $25 legendary white soldier commander. This thing's great for mono white soldier decks. It says during your turn, your opponents can't really fucks with you because they can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, enchantments. And whenever this thing attacks, you make X soldiers that are colorless, where the X is the amount of soldiers you already possess. This thing is so fun. I built this thing and I stopped playing it because it was too good and it was kind of oppressive. It's really good. It's 25 bucks. It's worth a proxy if you want to see if you could fit it into your vampire deck. It's cool. It does stop your opponents from interacting with you, so if you're doing a higher level of play for your commander games, this is a way to protect your board kind of during your turn. It itself makes a crap ton of tokens. It itself is a soldier. It's great, y'all. Oh, Duffler wants us to run a Polluter Bonds. Polluter Bonds. Polluter Bonds. Polluter Bonds. Polluter Bonds. Oh, Polluted Bonds. You probably mean Polluted Bonds. Yeah, Polluted Bonds. It's a black enchantment. It cares about lands entering the battlefield under your opponent's control. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your opponent's control, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Polluted Bonds is a very cheeky way to get life gain triggers during your opponent's turns. I ran it in that Aristocrats life gain deck I keep referencing during this live. I ran this in here because I wanted to gain life during my opponent's turn. If you care about gaining life during your opponent's turns, Polluted Bonds is a great way to do that, because what are your opponents going to do? Not play lands? No, they're going to shock themselves every time. Also, this thing got a rad reprint in Wilds of Eldraine. I like it. I like getting life gain triggers on other people's turns. Did you already do... No, I didn't do that vampire that starts with M. Mephedros? The Mephedros vampire. Mephedros. Mephedros. Please be spelled correctly. Thank you so much for spelling that correctly. Who are you? Are you my new best friends? Who spelled... Brian. Thank you, Brian, for spelling that word correctly for me. This is a Mephedros vampire. It's a 6-drop vampire. It's $3. It flies. It's a 3/4. And it says, each creature you control is a vampire in addition to its other types, and has when this creature deals combat damage to a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Okay, this thing's interesting. This thing got a very cool art. It almost looks Phyrexian to me. It's a 3/4. It fixes our board, right? So if we want to run like the Odric that shares keywords, or like the Odric that lets us declare blockers for our opponents, or if we want to run that Myrel Shield of Argive, or any of the other not vampire creatures we've seen during this live, this thing will fix it. It will turn them into vampires. It will give those vampires creatures, so when they're blocked, they're going to get +1/+1 counters. Thank you, Sean O'Keefe, for the follow. I appreciate it. Thank you, dude. If you guys want to suggest any cards for Edgar Markov deck, please put them in the comments. If you see your card over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list. And you can see what everybody else is running in their Edgar Markov by checking out the Moxfield page. And if you want to vote on commanders, check out the Bigger Gator Discord. Shared Animosity! Shared Animosity. Boyd, don't know if you did Bloodseeker, but I had him in my first attempt at building a vampire. We'll check out Bloodseeker next. Shared Animosity is a red card. It's got like this... Oh, nope. It was reprinted in Lord of the Rings. It's a 3-drop red enchantment, and it says whenever you control a creature... Whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+1 for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type. So in context of winning the game in Edgar Markov, I feel like we are going to have a wide board. Edgar Markov already makes a ton of tokens, and they're all vampires, and we're all going to be able to really front-load their attack power, their front ends, their power with this thing. It's not going to make them any tougher, but toughness doesn't win games. Power does, and this thing does power. Bloodseeker was our next one. Bloodseeker. Bloodseeker. Hey everybody, if you're just now joining me, I'm Bigger Gator Magic. I'm a video editor and streamer, and I make silly little Magic the Gathering content using green screen and graphics all over the internet. Thanks for hanging out with me. We're doing live deck building. We're building Edgar Markov today, and if you want to suggest some cards, put it in the comments. This deck is on Moxfield. If you want to see what other people are suggesting for Edgar Markov, check out the Moxfield link in the link tree on the profile. Thanks for hanging out with me. Bloodseeker's a 2-drop black vampire shaman. It's a 1/1, and whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may have that player lose 1 life. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, not our control, excuse me. This thing's great. It is a vampire, and it kind of keeps pinging our opponents. So things about cards that have these trigger that say whenever a creature enters the battlefield under control, or whenever something happens a lot, it's going to draw attention to this creature. This creature is probably going to draw a little bit of removal because you're going to be reminding people of these triggers when creatures enter the battlefield under their control. It's going to draw their attention, so don't be surprised if this thing gets got. But honestly, this thing reminds me a lot of Suture Priest, except it doesn't gain you any life. And I don't use my removal on Suture Priest. All right. Westvale Abbey, though. Let's talk about a Westvale Abbey. Westvale Abbey, I'm pretty sure, is the demon thing, right? It's the enchantment that flips into a demon. Westvale Abbey. Westvale Abbey. Oh, yeah, this thing. It's a land. It taps for colorless. It enters untapped, which is spicy. Pay 5 mana. Pay 1 life. Make a 1/1 white-black human cleric. Pay 5 mana. Sacrifice 5 guys. You get Orthandal. Profane Prince, it's a 9/7. It's a flying, life-linking, indestructible, hasty demon. Period. Full stop. That's just it. It's just a keyworded 9/7. On a land. On a land. Honestly, I kind of like it. I kind of like it a lot. This deck is very heavily into its black wedge of its color pie. Most of the vampires we've seen that have the best, most significant triggers and abilities have been in black. This thing taps for colorless, and that's my only concern on it. We would be running it in the land slot. We can use it as a sacrifice outlet to get death triggers, which is pretty cool. Apart from the demon itself, we can pay 5 mana, sacrifice 5 things, get 5 death triggers. That's pretty spicy all by itself. But we can also turn it into this demon in a pinch. I like it. I like it a lot, actually. It's only $1. It's only $1. Anawan. Anawan. Anawan the Ruin Sage. Anawan the Ruin Sage sounds like it's from Zendikar. It's a 5-drop black vampire shaman 4/3 at the beginning of your upkeep. Each player sacrifices a non-vampire creature. This thing's okay. So this is a little edict effect. It's our upkeep. So they're not sacking it on each of their upkeeps. It's one. It happens at our upkeep. It's a 5-drop vampire. It forces our opponents to get rid of creatures. If our opponents have tokens, they're just going to be sacrificing the tokens. But if they're running like a Voltron commander, this thing's going to hurt them. It's going to hurt them real good. Yeah, cool. It's also $3. That's not so bad. Thank you for the suggestion. Thank you, Ivan Jumper, for the Anawan suggestion. All right, Duffel wants us to run this here Starscape Cleric. Starscape Cleric. Is that the bat from Bloomborough? It is the bat from Bloomborough. I love this. All right, so I love Orzhov life gain strategies. I love them. I love this thing. I was excited when this thing got spoiled from Bloomborough. It's a 2-drop black bat cleric. It's a 2/1. It's got offspring. So if you pay a total of 5 mana for this thing, you get 2 of them. It can't block, but whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. And if you're running something like a Suture Priest, or like, any of those 1 mana, like the Solstice, that's right, Soul's Attendant, Soul Warden, any creature that says whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life, this thing goes crazy. Especially if you make like a crap ton of tokens all at once. It's so good. I love the Orzhov Aristocrats life gain strategy. It's my favorite strategy in all of Commander, and I love this thing. I don't even care that it's not a vampire. I love this thing. It's so good. And it's $1, and also it looks like the Starry Night Van Gogh. It's so good. It's such a good little piece of game design. I love that thing. Good suggestion. Ooh, a bunch of people want us to run the Stromkirk Captain. Stromkirk Captain. Is a hard word to say. It looks like it should be Stormkirk, but it's Stromkirk. Stromkirk Captain is a vampire soldier. It's 3 mana. It's got first strike, and it says that other vampires you control have +1/+1 and get first strike. This thing's great. It's a 3 CMC vampire lord. It makes our vampires all bigger, and we win by having a bunch of vampires. So this thing is going to give them first strike too, and if our vampires have death touch, first strike with death touch will kill the creature that blocks it before it can deal damage to it. This is great. First strike can be a significant keyword, but I feel like more significant than first strike on this thing is just the anthem on this lord. Very cool. It's also $1. Let's check out the flavor text. No longer can we allow our human populations to be mindlessly slaughtered by ghouls. Slay all who trespass. Alright. Okay. What about a generous plunder? What about generous plunder? What is generous plunder? Generous plunder Generous Plunderer is a human rogue. It's from the big score sheet off the Outlaws of Thunder Junction, and it is a $10 2/2 with Menace. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may create a treasure token. When you do, target opponent creates a treasure token, but theirs is tapped. And whenever this thing attacks, it deals damage to defending player equal to the number of artifacts they control. I like this thing. I'm not sure if it goes in a vampire deck, but this thing is $10. And shout out to the moderators on the Discord channel. Kai Brazil runs this thing, and he has stomped me with this thing. He has a treasure deck, and he runs this in it. And it just attacks. It gives you that damage trigger. And if you're running foods or clues, this thing can kill you pretty quickly, even at 40 life. It's really good. It is a little bit of a group hug card because you are giving your friends tap treasure tokens, but you're just giving them tokens to hurt them with it later. It also incentivizes your opponents to get rid of the tokens, which is pretty cool. Great little piece. I like it. I hope it goes down in price. Swords to Plowshares. Yeah, we got to be running Swords to Plowshares. We got to be running the best piece of removal in the game, right? Swords to Plowshares. Sorry for... Kevin, you go. As long as I can get it up. Oh, shit! Okay, this is very cool. So this is a new printing of Swords to Plowshares. This art is brand new for Aether Drift. And it's showing the plane of Amonkhet recovering from the Hours of Devastation and War of the Spark block. But anyway, Swords to Plowshares, it's 1 mana. It's like the quintessential white removal piece in Commander. It says exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. This thing's very cool. I keep talking about that Orzhov life gain Aristocrats deck, and I ran this in there, and sometimes it's the correct choice to Swords to Plowshares your own creature to gain some life. Or even to Path to Exile your own creatures to grab yourself a basic. Coldblade wants us to run a Valkyrie's Call. Valkyrie's Call. Valkyrie's Call. Valkyrie's Call. Where the hell is Valkyrie's Call? Oh my god. Ring of Valkyries. Valkyries. Valkyrie's Call. Came out in Foundations. It's $3. 5-drop. White enchantment. Very cool art. Excuse me. Whenever a non-token, non-angel creature you control dies, you put that creature back on the battlefield. You give it a +1/+1 counter. You give it flying, and it's an angel now in addition to its other types. I like this thing a lot. It's 5 mana. It's enchantment. It's like insurance for your creatures. We've seen humans, and I think maybe 1 or 2 creature types outside of vampires for our live deck tech for Edgar Markov. This thing, it's cool. I don't think we've seen a single vampire angel. There is a vampire angel. If you guys know the name of the vampire angel, put it in the comments. So this card reminds me of a card called Luminous Broodmoth, which is a 4 mana white creature that flies, and it says whenever a creature control without flying dies, you slam it back onto the battlefield with a flying counter. This reminds me of Luminous Broodmoth, except not as good, because it's more mana. But it's still pretty good. I like it. All of our vampires are not angels, and people are going to be wanting to get rid of our vampires. Thief of Blood. Thief of Blood. Who is stealing the blood? The Thief of Blood. Why? Alright, Thief of Blood is a 6-drop uncommon vampire 1/1 $3. It flies, and as this thing enters the battlefield, remove all counters from all permanents. Thief of Blood enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each counter removed this way. I love this. This is so silly. Okay, so I want you guys to think about the stuff that might have counters, right? Artifacts might have charge counters. Planeswalkers definitely have loyalty counters. Creatures will probably have +1/+1 counters, or keyword counters, or some kind of counters. Lands can have counters. There's a land called Dark Depths that we could use this thing to take the counters off. I like this thing. There's a lot. Wait, can it get rid of poison counters? Remove all counters from all permanents. Damn it, can't remove counters from players. If this thing could remove poison counters, it would be amazing. It's still pretty cool though. And also, if you could just, this thing just is a board wipe for Planeswalkers. It's a board wipe for Planeswalkers. And that alone feels pretty good to me. Also, it flies. I was shitting on that one card I misread at the very early beginning of the live. This thing flies, and it gets big. It bigs, and it flies. Very good. It also synergizes with +1/+1 counters. Shilgengar. Yeah, Shilgengar. I like Shilgengar. I put Shilgengar in that deck I keep talking about. That isn't this one, the Orzhov one. This is a 5 mana Orzhov demon. It's an Elder Demon. He's very mature. He's 50 cents. He's a flying 6/6, and you sacrifice another creature. At instant speed, you create yourself a blood token, but if you sacrificed an angel this way, you create a number of blood tokens equal to the toughness instead. And you want to be... I run this thing. So the commanders I'm referring to, the Orzhov commanders, is a partner commander, and one of the partners is an angel. And I put this thing in here because you could sacrifice the angel, and after that, you only need one more blood token, because the angel in that deck has 4 toughness, right? Yeah. And so then we could have 3 mana, put everything back from our graveyard onto our battlefield. I love this thing. This thing is a little recursion piece. It's so good. I run it in my partner Demon and Angel Orzhov deck. It's Krav and Regna, if anybody's familiar. But I like this card, but it's not a vampire, so we're going to move on up. Drana and Linvala is a mean-ass card. Drana and Linvala is a stacks piece. And it says that your opponents ain't got no more activated abilities on their creatures. Drana and Linvala, they're a vampire, they're an angel, and they say that they have all activated abilities of your opponent's creatures, and your opponent's creatures' activated abilities cannot be activated. Yeah, and this thing just has the abilities. So it turns off mana dorks, it turns off creatures that tap to do things, it turns off creatures that sacrifice creatures to do things. This thing just turns off your opponent's activated abilities. It itself is a vampire. It's a little bit of a funky mana cost, and the 2 white and 1 black. It's a 3/4, it has 2 keywords of flying and vigilance, and it's a vampire. It's going to trigger our commander, and it's going to turn off a lot of our opponent's stuff. Be careful, like, I wouldn't run this, I don't know, I probably wouldn't, I don't play this card. I have one of these, and it lives in a binder, because I play at Weenie Hut Juniors, and I want to make sure everybody has a good time. And if someone's commander is built around an activated ability, this will turn it off, and they're going to be poopy with you, perchance. Abe Froman wants us to run a Nighthawk Scavenger, a Nighthawk Scavenger. Thank you very much for the follow, Matt. I appreciate it. I'm BGM. I'm a video editor and streamer. On live deck building, we talk about a commander, and over here we pull up comments that you guys put in of cards that you would put into that commander. We're doing Vampire Tribal, and this is Nighthawk Scavenger. It's a 3-drop black life-linking, death-touching flyer. And this thing's power is equal to 1 plus the number of card types among cards in your graveyards. So this thing wants to have things in our graveyard. Oh, thank you, Rep Tarvin, for the follow. I appreciate it. And thank you guys for the 1,600 likes. Thanks for hanging out with me. This thing's cool. It is going to become a relevant body. It is going to get counters put on it because of Edgar's attack trigger. Or we saw a bunch of other things that slam down +1/+1 counters on vampires. And this is a great thing to put counters on. It flies, it death touches, it lifelinks. It does so much. It has a relevant toughness to start, and its power gets bigger as more stuff goes into the graveyards. It also cares about your opponent's graveyard, so it also incentivizes you to remove their permanents. This is a great card. I love that it's 50 cents, but mostly I love these 3 keywords. If we can give this thing first strike, it's absolutely diabolical. Rep Tarvin wants us to run the Roaming Throne. Yo, guys, when I first started doing live deck building in October, people would suggest Roaming Throne every single night. I feel like I haven't seen Roaming Throne in a week. This is Roaming Throne, if you guys are not familiar. It's $40, it's 4 mana, it's a colorless artifact golem, it's got Ward 2. When it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and creatures you control of the chosen type. We're picking vampires because of Edgar. Their triggered abilities trigger twice. So let's say that Edgar's on the battlefield. I don't know how this thing works with the Eminence trigger. Please don't ask me. I don't know how Eminence squares with this if it's in the command zone. But if this thing's on the battlefield, you're going to be making 2 vampires for each vampire you cast off Roaming Throne. And then if you have like a Blood Artist, it's going to trigger twice. It's going to be absolutely disgusting in your vampire deck. If you have a vampire that says when it enters the battlefield, it does a thing, this will make it do the thing 2 times. It's great. It's so good, in fact, that even in decks where your commander has a triggered ability and you don't care about creature types at all, but if you're just putting it in there to get multiple commander triggers, it's still really, really good. Ooh, Alenda's Hierophant. Ruben Villarreal, thank you very much for the follow. I appreciate it. Let's talk about Alenda's Hierophant. Alenda's Hierophant is one of my favorite cards from the Orzhov Vampire Caverns of Ixalan precon. This thing is $5, and I kind of think it's worth $5. I love this card. I love life gain strategies. I love having life gain triggers, and I love getting life gain triggers on our opponent's turns. And this thing cares, because whenever you gain life, you put a counter on Alenda's Hierophant. And when it dies, you make that many 1/1 white life-linking creatures, and this thing also flies. It gets big, it flies, and it dies, and it makes you an entire ass board with life-linking creatures. I love this thing. This thing is modeled off of Alenda, just Alenda. Elenda the Dusk Rose? It's just Elenda? Yeah, Elenda, this thing. Elenda the Dusk Rose, this thing. It's modeled after this thing, but it's not a legendary. I love it. This thing doesn't fly. It's a 1/1 lifelinker. Whenever another creature dies, including your opponent's creatures, you slam +1/+1 counters on Elenda, and when Elenda dies, she pops into 1/1 lifelinking vampire creature tokens equal to her power. She's a good time. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Yeah, so Roaming Throne does not work on the Eminence trigger because it's not on the battlefield. Thank you very much, Ivan Jumper. Ivan, thank you for hanging out with me all night. Thank you for... I appreciate you. All right, so let's talk about Rudolph. So Rudolph is the vampire angel, right? Rudolph is... He's very Hot Topic coded. He's a little silly to spell. He's got 2 O's. He's Rudolph, the Duskbringer. He is from the Jumpstart expansion. He's an Orzhov flying vampire angel. He's got flying, he's got death touch, he's got lifelink. He is a 4/4, and he says that whenever you gain life, he gains indestructible until end of turn, and he gives you an end step trigger. That at the beginning of your end step, you may pay Orzhov. When you do, you return target creature card with mana value X or less, where X is the amount of life you gained, to the battlefield. This thing's great. It's a little Orzhov commander. It brings back creatures to the battlefield. You want to gain life to get that trigger, and you do want to pay for it. It itself is a vampire with significant keywords. Yeah. Ooh, Coldblade wants us to run a Baron Bertam. Baron Bertam. Uh-oh. Baron Bertram Greywater. He's a vampire noble. He came out in Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, you make a 1/1 black vampire rogue creature token with lifelink. Triggers only once per turn. Pay 2, sack a creature or artifact, draw a card. This thing's great. This thing itself is a vampire. It makes vampires. And it sacrifices vampires for card draw. So it gives us the triggers on death triggers on the vampires we want to die. This thing's 10 out of 10. This thing needs to go in vampire decks. It doubles... If you're only making... Well, it doesn't quite double your vampire token output. But it does add an additional 1 each turn. This thing's perfectly great. It's also only 50 cents. It's card draw. It generates vampires. It gives you the wide board. His tokens have lifelink, which is significant. Great suggestion. Great suggestion. Looks like one of them new Capenna vampires. Blade of the Blood Chief. Blade of the Blood Chief. Blade of the Blood Chief. Thank you very much, a.k.a. Vargain. I appreciate it. Blade of the Blood Chief. So we saw this thing earlier. It's a 1-mana artifact equipment, and it equips for 1. It says if a creature would die, put a +1/+1 on the put a +1/+1 counter on the equipped creature. If the equipped creature is a vampire, it gets 2 +1/+1 counters instead. This thing's really cool. It's 1 mana to cast it, hangs out on the battlefield. You wait until you have a significant guy, probably something with like a lifelink or a flying keyword. You slam this thing on it, and then you make it have significant triggers, or just significant damage for your opponents. There's also, it's called like Tarion Soul Reaver. Tarion Soul Reaver is a new version of this, and I don't know how to spell it. Ooh, a Whip of Erebos. Whip of Erebos is rad. Whip of Erebos is a legendary black legendary enchantment artifact, and it says that creatures you control got lifelink. It also has an activated ability where we can pay 4 mana. We can take a creature from our graveyard, slam it onto the battlefield, give it haste, and exile it at the beginning of our next end step. Alright, y'all, that was the alarm. We have been going for an hour. We are going to take a few more suggestions and call it a night. One more time, I am BGM. I use green screen effects to make silly little Magic Gathering content all over the internet. Thanks for hanging out with me during live deck building. Our commander tonight was Edgar Markov. Thank you very much for giving me this spell check on Tarion Soulcleaver. Yeah, so our commander tonight, Tarion Soulcleaver, is going to be our number 5 card tonight. We're just going to try Soulcleaver. Soulcleaver. Tarion Soulcleaver is a 1-mana legendary artifact equipment with Equip 2. Equipped creature has Vigilance, and whenever another artifact is put into whenever an artifact or creature is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on the equipped creature. This thing's a lot like the Blade of the Blood Chief, except it's not super vampire-centric. But the thing about this thing is it works off artifacts, too. So when people are sacrificing food, clues, treasures, junk, blood, those things are going to trigger your Tarion Soulcleaver as well. Pretty good. Also, it was printed in the Caverns of Ixalan, which had a vampire precon. That is our number 5. Our number 4 is going to be Seeks. I almost said your name out loud on my stream. That's a great name, Seeks. Seeks D. Great name. What was your suggestion? Exquisite Blood. Your name was so good, I forgot your suggestion. Exquisite Blood is a card. We're going to do Exquisite Blood, and we're also going to do the Vampire for your suggestion, because I like to talk about them in conjunction. Exquisite Blood simply is the combo piece for a Vampire deck. It cares about life gain and life loss triggers. This thing says whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. It combos with a card called Sanguine Bond, which says whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. And they loop to end the game. Exquisite Blood used to be $30. It got reprinted in the Vampire expansion in the Caverns of Ixalan set. But, it's off. There's, Conqueror. It's like Bloodthirsty Conqueror. Conqueror. Nope. There's a 5 mana thing. It came out in... Ooh, Gunner. Stinging Study. Stinging Study is going to be our number 3. I can't think of the name of the 5-drop black creature from Foundations that has Exquisite Blood printed on it. Stinging Study. Stinging Study. Thanks for stopping in, Gunner. Good to see you and your handsome face. Stinging Study is a black card. It's a 5-drop instant. It says you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the mana value of a commander you own on the battlefield or in the command zone. This thing's great. This is just a 5 mana, lose 6, draw 6. We saw a Whip of Erebos. So many vampires have lifelink. We are going to have no problem paying a little life for this thing. Thank you, Gunner, for the suggestion. That's our number 3. Alright, so Bloodthirsty Conqueror. Thank you. Ivan Jumper, MVP of tonight's stream. Thank you for backing me up, Ivan Jumper. I'm sorry if the clapping fucked up the audio, y'all. Let's talk about a Bloodthirsty Conqueror. Bloodthirsty Conqueror. Bloodthirsty Conqueror is a 5-drop, mono black, $45 vampire knight that flies and has Death Touch and has Exquisite Blood printed on it. The thing about, when I see this card, these keywords feel like overkill to me. It's already a 5/5, 4/5, it didn't need flying, and it didn't need Death Touch because it already has Exquisite Blood printed on it. This card's crazy. Also, if you're not even playing with like the Sanguine Bond combo or the Veto combo. Veto's also a vampire, by the way, so they both go in the vampire decks, fitting really well. This thing is still good, even if you don't have the combo pieces in the deck at all, because whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. When your opponents attack each other, or when your opponents hurt each other, you gain the life off this Bloodthirsty Conqueror. It's also a flying Death Toucher. Why did they give it keywords? The keywords were too much. Alright. Alright, we're gonna do 2 more. Alright, Coldblade, you've given us some good suggestions. Let's do a Dazzling Theater. Dazzling Theater is our number 2 tonight. Dazzling Theater is a room from Duskborn. It's white. The 4-drop side says the creature spells you cast have Convoke. Convoke means that we can tap creatures while we're casting spells to help cast them. Our boy Edgar is going to make a bunch of creatures that we can tap to convoke things out. We can also cast the 3-drop side to untap each creature controlled during each other players. Whoa. Whoa, excuse me? That's amazing. That 3-drop side is so good. I run a lot of decks that run activated abilities and that creatures that tap to do things. This thing will untap those creatures every turn, and then you can activate those abilities at instant speed on your opponent's turns. This is where it's at for me. It's this side for me, y'all. Also, if you can give your creatures flash, and you have unlocked both sides of the room, you could just cast creatures during your opponent's turn, as if they're for free, because your creatures are going to untap during each... This thing's so good! How is this thing only $3? Why is this thing only $3? This thing's really fucking good. Great suggestion. Who put this in here? Who put this in here? I know I said... Coldblade! Coldblade, thank you for the suggestion. I might have to get me one of them. That one's really fucking cool. Alright, guys. Brian, thank you for hanging out with me, Brian. Your Creeping Bloodsucker is going to be our last card of the night. Creeping Bloodsucker is a black 2-drop vampire 1/2 from the Jumpstart expansion. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain life equal to the damage dealt this way. So it's a low drop vampire. It enters, or excuse me, we cast it, we get a vampire off Edgar Markov. This thing, it gives us an upkeep trigger to ping our opponents. And because it's reminding our opponents, and it's giving us like 3 life every turn, our opponents might hone in on it because it's happening every turn. It's going to remind them it exists, and it might draw removal. And I feel like this thing drawing removal is really good. Also, this fucking common is $5. This common is $5. Yikes on trikes. Okay. That's pretty good, y'all. Alright, cool. Alright, everybody. That is going to be our live deck building of Edgar Markov on February the 5th. I want to thank you guys all for hanging out with me. Thank you for all the banger vampire suggestions. If you want to see any of the cards we talked about tonight, check out the Moxfield page. That's on the link tree. And if you want to vote on what commanders we talk about next week, join my Bigger Gayer Discord server. And you can vote in the live deck building channel. And you can also look at the pretty faces of the Discord in the Faces channel. And you can see all the delicious food we're cooking up in the Food Wars channel. Thanks for hanging out with me, y'all. And I hope you all draw the appropriate amount of lands during your next game. Take care, y'all. Thanks for vibing with me.